Hello and good evening all. We're just waiting for a few more people to arrive who've booked in, so I'll just give it another minute or two and then we'll get started. Okay, right, so let's get cracking. So first, thanks for everyone for coming this evening to watch this webinar. We're going to be doing just a basic sort of new build to give you an idea how the software works and have a look at the sort of data that's in there. As we're going through, you'll see that your GoToMeeting box on the right hand side, you've got a little button that you can press and you can ask questions, which I'll try and answer as we go through, and we'll also do a little bit of a Q&A session at the end as well if you like. Okay, so this is the Building Works design screen. You see in the central areas where we do our drawing, and on the left hand side we have our project tree where we can see our drawing. We can also got the estimate side of things, so we can flick between the two. The build programming, reporting, bill of quants if you have the QS option, and of course our quotes. So what we're going to do is start off by doing a drawing, and then later on we're going to go through these other options on the left hand side. Now for simplicity, I'm just going to do a quick bungalow just to give you the basic principles of how you put a job together. Across the top we have all the architectural items, and basically these are all of the components that can be drawn and have costs associated with them. I'm going to start with an external wall just to give myself a shell. And this is a fairly common feature. Most of the items you click on, you will get all sorts of variations of different types of walls or roofs, etc. As you can see, we have an array of masonry walls, timber frame, SIPs, ICF, and outbuilding walls. When you choose a wall, and I'm going to do tonight's demo with a block-on-block rendered wall, we then get given an array of various specifications with U values. So we have two basic thermal performance walls, one with a full fill cavity and one with a partial fill. These are the typical sort of wall you would use for an extension. And then we have a high thermal performance wall. You see there the U value is 0.17. That would normally fulfill the regs for a new build. You'll also notice that the wall itself is thicker. It's 340 mm thick as opposed to 300. And that's following the government elemental recipe. And then we have an ultra-high wall, which is a 0.14 U value with a 370 thickness. Now for tonight, I'm going to use a 0.17 U value, which is for a new build. Now when you choose a wall, this is designed by us with typical set of components, and you can adjust these. So just for the wall, I'm just going to jump in and review a specification just so you can see how these are made up. So within the specification we have what we call assemblies. So each one of these with an arrow is an assembly. An assembly is made up of several rates. So we have here the main block-on-block wall itself, and within that, this then has assemblies for things such as your decoration, your render, the blocks themselves, insulation, more blocks, plasterboard, and the decoration. So that's all the wall made up of several components. And we can drill down into these, and if we want to, we can actually swap items around. So if we wanted to choose, say, a lesser or a greater insulation, we could click on one of these. We can use the swap button and choose an alternative product. And you see that these other part assemblies will deal with other components within. So whether we've got an opening, window, structural opening, etc., these assemblies will deal with the components associated with those. So I'm going to click Next. And the first thing we'll do is tell what sort of wall we're going to be doing. This will be a ground floor, which means it will automatically then move on to doing the footing and foundation questions. It's going to ask me what sort of foundation I want. I'm going to go with a trench fill foundation to a new build, and what that will do is assume that we're going to have a JCB on site. The extension option will go to use a mini digger, and a hand dig will use many hours of labour. We can alter the size of the foundation to suit. By default, it's a fairly typical set of dimensions. We can then choose our footing type, and we'll go with a brick with a 100mm block cavity footing. And then the configuration we want is for a trench fill foundation. So we'll select that, and on the next screen this will be correctly set up, so it won't bother with things like trench blocks, which you would use if we're going to do a strip fill. Last question we have is details of the wall height. Now, if this was a multi-storey house, so if this was going to be a two-storey wall, or two-storey house, sorry, then you would probably have the ground floor wall would be 2625, which would be typically a 2400 wall with an allowance of another 225 on top for your joist thickness. And we also have an option here to omit that joist thickness of decoration. So internally, we'll switch off 225mm of decoration and plastering because that area would be left blank. Now, for a single story wall, I'm actually going to zero this figure out on the left hand side. I'm going to alter my wall height here to 2400, and you'll see we've got a set of heights here, which is your typical heights with brick. You can, of course, type a figure in here if you want to. It's now going to ask us if we'd like a concrete pump for strip foundations, so I'm going to say yes and allow a day to give a cost for the concrete pump. Once I've done that, I am now ready to start drawing my masonry shell. You notice the instruction window at the bottom of the screen is always telling us what to do next, and it's at the moment saying click to place a start point, so I shall do that. And I'm now ready to start drawing my house. So the arrow that you can see on screen, I'll just zoom in slightly, that defines the outside wall. So if I draw this way round, then my outside wall will be on the inside. What this means is all the 3Ds will look wrong, the elevations will look wrong, and all my windows will be inside out, so my window sills are on the outside. So depending on which direction you want to draw, I can either go in this direction or I could go this direction, and I can use the F key to just flip my outside wall. Okay, I always like to draw anti-clockwise, so I'm going to leave it set up like this. Now this is great. I can draw using my arrow keys. I don't have to try and work out straight lines or anything like that. I can simply hit the down arrow key on my keyboard, and I can type in a dimension. So I'm going to go with 8000. I'm going to press my enter key. I can now press my right arrow key, and I can go left 6000. I can go down 2000, right 3000, and I can be really lazy and I can press the S hotkey, which is mentioned at the bottom for square, and that will finish my drawing off for me. So that's drawn the masonry shell of our property. And if we look at the bottom right hand corner, you will see it's instantly given us a cost, £21,976. Because we've drawn some walls, we've also got an extra items box appeared at the right hand side with some things we may want to add in. If these walls are going to be an extension, for example, we would probably want to add typically 4 wall starters in, one for each leaf. In this case, nice new build, so there won't be any wall starters, so we don't need any of these extra items. So next what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump ahead slightly, and I'm going to go to my floors because I want to get my floor filled in nice and quick. So I can click on my floor. We have a typical array: timber, suspended floors, concrete slabs, beam and block, rafts, etc. I'm going to go with a concrete slab floor. And again we see we have an array of combinations and also with various U values. So plain slab, slabs with screed, slabs with underfloor heating built into them, so that basically has got all the pipe work included in the cost. For my job here, I'm just going to go with a plain concrete slab with a screed finish, insulation above the slab with a high thermal performance. So again, the high thermal performance is one that's a typical requirement for a new build to meet the SAP regs. Again, I could click on review specification and go through the detail, but I don't want to keep doing that. I'll probably end up boring you slightly. So for this, I'm just going to click finish. And because I've not drawn any of my walls yet, I can actually cheat to do this. So I just put the cursor inside the box, press the letter F, which you'll notice is a hotkey at the bottom. And that's my entire slab drawn. It's given it a cost of £10,000, as you can see, because my cursor's hovering over it. You'll also notice in the bottom right hand corner the price of my estimate has now jumped up to just over £32,000. Over here on the right hand side, again, it's prompting us for extra items such as insulation to perimeter, which I'm going to draw in a second, and then whether I want a concrete pump for the slabs and rafts or for the floor screeds. Now what I might say is that I might use the same pump that was used on the trenches. I don't know if that's correct, but if not, I could make an allowance for that, and maybe an allowance for a concrete pump for the screed. Obviously you guys know what you're going to use, so you just fill in whichever figures are correct. And then for my insulation, I'm going to click on the draw button, and I'm going to draw around the perimeter of my insulation, of the slab should I say, to place my insulation. And I'm going to press the C key to close it off and finish it. Okay, and our price is now up to just shy of £33,000. So next we're going to put in some doors and windows. So I'm not going to do the whole house, so I'll just do a few for example. So I'm going to put a front door in first. So I'll go with an external door set. We have an array in here. We've got mostly crystal composite PVC doors. We also have a lot of gel-end products. Huge catalogue, and the benefit of using the crystal stuff is we've got direct pricing from them, so you know you've got fairly good trade prices. We can filter by a variety of options. For example, we can choose the width of the door that we'd like, different heights. We'll go 286. Which hinge side we want, and also importantly the U value of the door. So we could go with a very high or very high quality of this low U value door of say a 1, and again we can choose a colour. I will of course choose black. It asks us for the reveal depth, typically 50mm. We can then place our door, and we can either do this by dimension or we can do it by snap point. So I'm going to press my F7 key, which turns on my snap mode. So I'm going to put my door right in the middle, and I can choose then which direction I want it to open. So I'm going to place that there. Once I've chosen the direction, the software automatically goes in to allow you to choose a lintel. So you can choose one of these options, or in this case I'm going to go straight for a standard cavity lintel. Do I want a door set with a cavity tray or without? I'm going to go with. That's placed the lintel on there, and again it's asking us for extra items. Do we want some cavity weep vents? So I'm going to say yes, I'll have 2 of those please. Next we can place some windows. As you see, we've got PVC, softwood, hardwood, etc. We've also got things like Veluxes and various dormer windows. So I'm going to go with a PVC window. I'm going to choose a nice, typical sort of 1800 wide, 1200 high, and again I'm going to go with a high quality window, so I'm going to choose a 1.1 U value filter. And then we've got various different designs we can choose from. I'm going to select this one, choose a colour. It will then ask you for what the window height is. So again, 2100 is fairly traditional, but you can of course adjust it up and down. Again, external reveal depth, typically 50. And I can start placing windows. Again, I can switch between dimensions and snapping. Okay, for tonight I'm just going to click these in a little bit randomly. So I'm going to have a window here. It's then going to ask me for a lintel. Again, I'm going to go with a cavity lintel with a cavity tray. Once I've placed the first one, I can then carry on placing more windows. And because I've already done the cavity selection once, it will continue with the same selection. Okay, by the way, never follow any of my house designs, are always dreadful. Again, I've got an option here for cavity weep vents for my windows, so I could go and associate each window with some weep vents. So I could say I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows, so let's just have 10 weep vents. I could do with weep vents as I went with each window, but it's probably quicker just to go around placing them and then add the weep vents afterwards. Entirely up to you which way around you'd like to do that. One thing we also can do is we're going to have a quick look here at our 3D model. And we'll see how our house is now starting to take shape. You can also see bottom right hand corner, our cost is being calculated instantly. We're now up to 37,000. And just to show you here on the left hand side where our project tree, if I just expand the estimate part, you'll see that we're now starting to get the build up of the jobs. We have our walls, footings, foundations, doors, windows, floors, etc. We can delve into those a little bit later. So next for our house, we're going to put on a roof. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to switch into sketch mode. One of the things what does happen is as you start drawing, you start to get a lot of hatching and things can get quite busy. When you're placing roofs, quite often the roof line and the foundation footing line down here can fight with each other a little bit. So a quick trick is we can alter our view into something we call sketch mode, which gives you this nice sort of clean view. It's quite a nice mode also for printing out, for sending designs to clients. It gives them a much cleaner image. Obviously for your guys on site and your trades, they would probably prefer a detailed view. But the sketch mode is quite nice for drawing on sometimes. Just makes it a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier. So now I've done that, I'm going to go and draw a roof. As you can see, we have a range of roofs. So we have an attic cut roof. So if we were going to be building an attic in this, we would draw an attic cut roof, and what that will do is it will give us the prompts for things like upstands, a proper ceiling for the attic as opposed to a thin ceiling, your vaulted ceiling above it, etc. And all the extra options you need for designing an attic, and it will put those all on the right hand side. A cold cut roof, that will give us a prompt to draw a flat ceiling. A vaulted cut roof will give us a prompt to draw a vaulted ceiling, also with options for colour. And then we have truss roof equivalent to that, SIPs roofs, sorted flat roofs, and then we have outbuilding roofs as well. Also to show you here, more for working on existing property, if you have a roof that's going to be retiled, you can draw a roof to be retiled and it will automatically cost retiling. Same with the refurbishment. With this option, you can draw a roof that's going to be completely or partially renovated, which could be simple as just doing, say, tiles, battens, felt, and a bit of the timbers, or you can be doing all the timbers and all your soffits, all your gable ends, etc., guttering, and basically when you draw that, you can go into the options and you can choose how little of each component you want to replace. Very powerful tool. For this evening, I'm just going to do a plain cold cut roof with a flat ceiling. Again, we get asked about the thermal performance we want. So because it's for a new build, I want a 0.12, so that's our high thermal value. You can see we have different centers. I'm going to go with a 400, that's fairly common. And then click next. And now I'm asked what sort of tiling system we want. Obviously, if you select the wrong tiling system, for example, if you go with small clay tiles, that's significantly more expensive than using a modern, a mildly modern or a concrete interlocking, for example. So I'm going to go with a double Roman style of tile, and by choosing this, it will select all the little tiles that go with it correctly. Our roof tile assembly of our ridge will go with a dry ridge with fixing. And then we can tell it the shape of the roof we're going to draw. So we could go with an apex, a hip, a barn hip, a lean-to, or a hip-ended lean-to. Now for this job, I'm going to do a hipped roof. We can select our pitch. We can also choose different assemblies for different soffit sizes. So we've got a 150, if I choose the swap button here. We can also have a 225 and a 300. The reason these are done as assemblies as opposed to just putting a dimension in is because they come with all the materials, because you have different types of material, and essentially the soffit boards to go with these different sizes of soffits. I'm going to go with a 45-degree pitch here. We'll use value boards. We then get an option to do things like change the price of our tiles, for example our large format tiles. We've got here as £1. It could be that we're actually going to be paying £1.20 each for those, so it's a quick option to change them. Our concrete ridge tiles, £6.50, that could be the right price. So because tiles are very variable in price, you have an option here. You can just quickly go in, put the correct price of tiles in for each of these areas. And once that's done, we're ready to start drawing our roof. You'll see the instruction window at the bottom is telling us what to do. So it says click on a wall that the roof is on, and the reason for this is this will define where the wall plate is and thus the base height of the roof. With this example, it's very straightforward because all our walls are the same height, but quite often you're drawing, for example, you might be drawing an extension where the extension walls are lower than the existing property, for example, so you need to make sure that it's the extension wall that you click on to define the base height of the roof. I'm going to click the edge of any wall to give me my base height. And the software now says to click on the first corner to indicate a width of the building, and the width would be the gable end. Now obviously in this design we've got a bit of a hip going on, so it would be the hip end. So I'm going to go first corner, second corner, and then third corner over here, which gives me my hip roof. Over on the right hand side it's given me options to draw purlins, loft hatch, extra binders, weak vents, etc. And of course this bit here, which is slightly off the screen, if I just do this, my insulated ceiling. Okay, so I'm going to put my ceiling in now before I finish the next part of the roof. So I'm going to click my draw button. And again, I can cheat because I've not drawn any walls yet. I can put the cursor in here and press my F key. There we go. That's just drawn my entire ceiling for me. 78 square meters of it. If I right click and flick into detail mode, you can see here that's got my ceiling and that's got my joist direction. If I want to, I can click on the joists, thus, and I can actually toggle my joist direction. Now for this example I'm going to leave it going this way. Okay, so I'm going to flick myself back into sketch mode because I want a new piece of roof, obviously going over this entrance. So to right click that, I can go on, click on already used specifications. So anything that you've already drawn you can go back and reuse again. So I want the same specification of roof. So I can just go down my drop downs and say there we go, roof 1, I'd like another one with the same setup. We'll have a hip again. And then again just choose a wall, corner and corner, and this time I'm going to press the letter T as I'm prompted to at the bottom here, so that I can T this into this roof line here. And there we go. So we've now got a price up to 54,000. We can go to our 3D model. That's where we're up to so far. So as you can see, oops, didn't mean to hit that. Fairly quick and easy to do. Of course, what we are lacking is some interior walls. So I'm just going to do a quick set of interior walls. I will again, as I said before, design this very badly. So you see we have timber stud walls, metal stud walls, internal block single skin, internal block cavity, timber frame, SIPs and ICF. So all the sort of walls you're typically using. I'm going to do some block single skin walls. And with them being internal and single skin, there's not much in the way of U value difference. Obviously you have a bit of U value, but tend not to be so important. What we do have, more importantly, is the amount of plastering and the thickness. So you see that we have 3 thicknesses, either plastered both sides or plastered one side. Obviously, if you were doing a property where maybe there was going to be a garage, you would potentially not plaster the garage side of the wall. Now for this, I'm going to go with double-sided plastering. It's a ground floor, so that will then prompt me to do more footings and foundations. We'll alter that to a 400. With a solid 100mm blockwork footing, that makes sense. Configured for trench fill. And again, we get this option with the sides to not be finished. So again, if this was a 2-storey house that we were drawing, we could potentially finish both sides on either side. In this case, this is going to be a single-storey wall, 2400, so we don't need to have an unfinished area. Concrete pump for the strip foundations. Now we've already made an allowance for that on the external walls, so I don't think we need another concrete pump. And now I can start drawing my internal walls. Okay, so you'll see that this is actually drawing the wrong side of the corner. That's all to do with my justification. So I can either alter my justification up here by altering it to the right, or I can use a justification hotkey, which is J. Okay, and as you can see, I've stitched myself up royally by putting the window right in the middle of where I want to put that wall. So I'm going to cheat. Once I've started drawing some walls, I can just carry on drawing internal walls until I've finished. As I said before, you would never use one of my designs in the real world. I'm just going to flick this into detail mode. Okay, so I'm ready to place my internal doors. As you can see, this is quite busy, so one of the other options we have is we can go to our layers, and we can do things like, say, switch off ceilings, for example, because that's quite busy. And I'm also going to hide my slab floor because that's quite busy as well. And there we go, just cleans the drawing up a bit. I can now go back to my doors, and I can place some internal doors. So I'm just going to do a set of 813s. Yeah, nice veneer finish. I'll just choose that for speed. 32 by 115 lining set will do nicely. And now I can go placing some doors. Again, whenever you place a door, you can choose the direction of opening. Because it's a block wall, it's asking me if I want a lintel. And now I've done one, I can just continue placing those doors. And design the worst ever house. Okay, so happy with that. Okay, admittedly it's not a great design, but it's for example purposes. If we go back to my 3D model, we can start to do things like this. We can go to our visibility and we can switch off our roof. We can switch off our ceiling and we can then see our internal layout. I can put these all back on if I want to. I can right click on this wall over here and I can hide this wall. So the 3D is quite handy for you to be able to actually drill down. You can take snapshots of this. Obviously that's probably not a great angle. But you can save these images so you can send them to your client or whoever. You can even, if you save an image, actually once you've saved it, import it and bring it back onto the drawing. Very handy if you're doing a planning design and you'd like to give some 3D representation on the planning drawing to help building control understand what it is you've designed. Okay, we can see our cost is up to £61,000, and of course I can keep going and designing more elements, but it's probably going to be a bit of repetition. Just a quick run through, obviously, the other components you can do. Obviously, we've talked about attics before. Small roofs is for things like dormers. You can draw in your drain runs, soakaways, manholes, etc. External works, decking, fencing, paving drives. You've got your site strip, of course, doing turfing. With your plumbing, you can add in things like a boiler system. So I'm going to quickly show you how this works because it's quite clever. So if we go with the gas combi boiler, choose a brand. I'm going to go with Worcester. Choose a model, so let's use a good old Green Star 28. You can go with a flue kit, so I'm going to go with a extended one because I'm going up to the bungalow. I can then position my boiler on my drawing somewhere, so I think I'll stick it in this corner here. And then once I've done that, I then get the extra items that go with the boiler. So we have the boiler unit itself, and we have things like our gas pipes. So what we can do now is we can actually draw our pipe runs if you want, so we can draw where the gas pipe is, or I could just say, I just want an allowance of 5 metres of copper pipe, please, of various fittings. Or I could say, actually, yes, I'd like to draw that as a length. I'm going to have some gas pipe doing this to my external supply. We have options for cutting holes. And we can then go to other options such as heaping pipework, etc., and draw your pipe runs. We can put in an underpipe lintel for under the cavity, etc. Electrics, similar sort of principle. We can choose our plug sockets. Go with a stainless steel set. And we can either draw the plug sockets so you can position them around the drawing, or I can just say I'd like a quantity of this many plug sockets, please. They will both give exactly the same cost, but obviously one will give you a visual. One clever thing you can do with this is you might actually want to show exactly where some plug sockets are going. Now, the way I would do this is I would start off by putting a linear dimension on my drawing. So I'm going to use the linear dimension tool for my drawing and annotation tab. I'm going to click in this corner, and I want a plug socket that's going to be positioned a metre in from this corner. So I've got an arrow ready to go. I can go left arrow, 1000, press enter. I've now got a 1 metre dimension. I'll choose my ground floor double socket. I can position that. So what I've got there is an actual visual representation on the drawing so that I could produce a version of this drawing for the trades with all sorts of various things on, whether it's plumbing, electrics, etc., your light switches, your light fittings, consumer units. You can place all these objects on the drawing, and if you want to, you can dimension them up and annotate. Whilst talking about dimensions, we also could do things like this. We can click on the wall. We have a dimension tool for the wall. So again, you can annotate your drawing for the people on site, and you obviously can go externally, or we can go internally. So you can put as much detail on the drawing as you like. Of course, these will all appear on layers, so you can switch them on or off, so you can print out different versions of the drawing for different people. Obviously, if you're showing this to a client for the first time, they're probably not so much interested in all these detailed dimensions. The guys on site, though, will probably want all of it. Okay. If you did want to put some dimensions on for a client, though, you could just put, again, like I did before, just say you wanted to show the width of this hallway, you could put a linear dimension on. Like that, for example. So back on the architectural, you also have options like plastering, decoration, We have some basic kitchen and bathroom fit out, and of course we have a renovation tool. There's an option here called Rooms, which I showed on last week's webinar. If you would like to see the Rooms option, please just drop me an email. I'll send you last week's webinar. That's where you can actually draw existing properties and you can renovate the rooms with a few clicks. It makes it extremely rapid. Okay, so that's the basis of drawing a property. Obviously, we're not going into all the details we need to. We've got a cost so far. And if we look on the left-hand side over here, we can actually then switch into looking at some of our estimate data. So here are our external walls, and we can see we have our 6 walls numbered. I can click on one of my walls. And we can see here's the specification of what's made it up. And here's our dimension link components. So we can see we have a wall, a footing and a foundation linked to it, and also we have 2 openings created by these windows. So those will be areas that will be omitted from the block work, installation, render, etc. You can produce a report. You can actually do a breakdown of cost by each individual component. Some people like to have that kind of data. And we can drill down through all those various sections. Now I'm going to go to the estimate menu at the top here. So when I click on estimate, I get all my usual estimating calculators. I also get some additional ones, such as demolition, because you can't draw a wall that's being demolished, but you can put in a figure. So if you've got to say a garden wall that's been demolished or something, excuse me, maybe some dwarf walls from an old conservatory, slab demolition, roof demolition. Fire stops, and then of course the big costs, which you can't draw, are prelims, things like site establishment, design costs, insurance costs, cleaning, scaffolding, etc. Travel costs. We have sundry plant, and we have management and site staff, so you can actually put an allowance in for project managers, etc. You also have an option for putting in subcontract quotations. And you'll see these are all for the fairly typical trades. So it might be with this property that you might want to say have an allowance for a plumber. We won't bother drawing the plumbing. We might just put some symbols in to show where the plumbing is going to go. But you've also had a plumber's come in and he's told you that he's going to do all your plumbing for £5,000, for example. Okay, the next part of this we have is our estimate checker. So we have a very handy button here which will basically pick you up on things that you may have forgotten. So I'm going to check my estimate for any potential errors. This will give me some reds and some greens. I've got 4 reds here saying there's 4 estimating calculators that have been identified as having potential errors or omissions. So if I click on my estimating calculator button, I can see here that my internal block wall with plastering has got a red, which means I've not looked at my additional components. I skipped over them. So let's go back to the drawing and have a look at those. Okay, now in this case it's asking me if I want any wall starters. So I may want to put some wall starters in, or I could actually say no, that's fine, I don't want any wall starters. Let's go back to my estimate checker and say that's done. So I'll go back in here, go back to my external walls and go, actually no, those are fine. My rendered wall hyperthermal performance, that's wondering about some items again, I know that's okay. My tiled roof, I might have forgotten something, I can go back to it, etc. So you get the idea. The commonly used estimating calculators, so these are essentially your prelims, it will flag them if you haven't filled them in. So it's just a really good reminder because these often do get forgotten. So if I want to put my travel costs, I can go back in, fill my travel costs, that will then turn green. Okay. So once we've done our drawing, we've checked our emissions are okay, we can then start looking at our reports and our data. So the first thing to do is go to our build program. We can put in a potential start date for the job. So let's say we're going to start this in September. We can then specify the amount of assorted labourers we have. So make it a bit bigger. So we could say we're going to have 2 bricklayers, ground workers, we're going to have a couple of bricklayers, we're going to have 2 joiners, etc. And what they will do is they will speed up the duration of the build phases. Because Building Works is all built on rate data, it means that we can actually calculate exactly how long these tasks are going to take. So this bar chart is based on the calculated duration that we have worked out for everything that you've drawn. So you see here we've got a masonry shell of approximately 2 weeks. If I go to rebuild my program and say, actually, do you know what, I'm going to have a 4-in-2 gang because I want to get a shift on. I click finish. Our masonry shell has been now reduced to about 6 or 7 days. So you see it automatically recalculates the duration of the build program. What that now means is because we've got a build program, we can start looking at all our date-based reports, such as cash flow, etc., and start drilling down into the data. So we have a large array of reports, and these are just some pre-made ones we've done. You can make as many different types of report as you like. Basically, if the data is in the software, you can produce a report which includes that data. We'll look at a few common ones. Cash flow being a biggie. Okay. The estimate completion checker will keep popping up until I tick a box to say, please stop popping up. So what this has got is the start of assorted build phases and showing us the costs associated with that build phase. And then from this, and using your build program, you can then put together a stage payment plan from your client. You can look at a cost report, which will split it down by our build phases. Look at labour used. And I've got a labour used here by build phase name. If I wanted to, I could switch that to by elements, for example. So you could drag things in and out. So I could drag my build phase out here, for example. And if you've got the QS version of the software, I could bring in my element name. I can do the same report by element as opposed to build phase. Okay, so basically any data you've got, you can drag it in or out of report to be able to view it. We can look at materials used. Again, this is typically filtered by build phase, or if I wanted to, I could remove the build phase, and that will just give me an unfiltered list of all our materials. And of course, all these reports can be exported to a variety of formats, Excel being the most common, you've got CSV, PDF, etc., rich text. So if you wanted to, you can export this to Excel, you can then have a little bit of run up and down, do a bit of rounding up if you wanted to, and then you could create your order schedule to your merchant from the material list. I would probably do that by having my build phase in, and I would actually create my order list by using the build phases for the materials. You can have a plant list. So again, to make sure that you've got the correct plants ordered to be on site on time. Profit forecast, fairly important one. So this is estimating that with our 15% markup, our profit on this job will be about 9,400. And this is net profit figure, which actually prompts me to jump back to my estimate button for a moment. On here we can specify the markup and adjustment, and we split them into 2 parts. So typically you may estimate a job and then add 20, 25, 30% markup onto it. What we do is we divide that up into your overhead markup. For a smaller building company, quite often your overheads are about 15% of your build costs. So by putting a 15% markup in, that will cover your fixed costs, essentially, which could be your job as the manager of the company or the designer, or you're doing the selling, you're doing the ordering, etc. And then on the right hand side, we have our actual money that the company's going to be making. If you're a slightly larger company and you've done things like specified project managers, site managers, etc. within your prelims, then you could reduce this markup figure to something like 12 or 10 or maybe 8%. Okay. Whenever we look at reports down here which talk about the profit, they're always looking at this figure on the right hand side. This is your actual net profit, so this is money that the company will be making. Okay, so that's a quick snapshot at some of the reports. Obviously, there's all sorts in here you can have a look at, and as I've said, you can make many more reports. I was with a customer yesterday. We made 20 new reports that he wanted. Took us about 15 minutes. Now, a quick shot for those people who are interested in the QS edition. Because Building Works is based on rates data, we can produce NRM elemental bill of quantities or schedules. So if I have a look at the elemental one first, this does a breakdown by your sort of elements. And you can have various different formats, summary, with or without profits, etc. And you'll see this gives us this style of report. And this is following the NRM2 standard. For those of you who are more used to dealing with architects and QSs, this may be reasonably familiar. And the other option we have here is the work section NRM2 report. This breaks it down by various, it's more by trade. Okay, you have a price one, and one option we do have here is you have one that shows no prices. And this is a document that you would actually send out maybe to subcontractors so that they could actually then tender back to you with cost rates for these various work areas. Okay. For those of you who are dealing more directly with a domestic client, we have the traditional build phase style quotes. Again, we have an array of pre-made ones, and you can modify these, tweak these, change them to however you want. So we have a very short one, which is our abbreviated customer quote. I skipped past the details at the start of the job, so if you fill in your client details, they will appear here, and your company logo you can put on the front. You have an introductory letter, and then a quote by build phase. And if you want to, you can even do things like you could hide these various section breakdowns, so you've just got the cost for each build phase. Or I can go right to the opposite end of this and have everything switched on quote with far more detail. And you see it's as quick and easy as just choosing a different option, finding a format you like, and then you can export this to PDF. I would probably export it to Word myself, so I can maybe do a little bit of final editing and fine-tuning. The document itself, I'm just going to go to the abbreviated one, just to so it's a bit less scrolling down. So you have each build phase laid out with its costs. You have an optional summary page, which you can switch on or off, and then at the end, of course, you have an acceptance letter for yourself and for your client. And we have a blank T's and C's page, which you can put your T's and C's in within the options for the quote up here. If you've already got a terms and conditions document, you can highlight the content of it and literally paste it into this box. This screen, you can bring in your logo. You can do things like you can switch off those little subsettings if you want, so you can edit this as much as you like. See, I've now made this even shorter. So you can go in and change this customer quote layout get it so exactly how you want it, and again you can then save that to the library, and you've got your own format. Okay, so that's kind of using the software in a sort of quick look. Just to give you a quick look at the library side of things. So this is the content of Building Works. This is all the stuff in the background. And the main part that you'll be looking at is the rates. So we have material, labour, plant rates. So if we have a quick look at our labour section here. These are all our labourers. These are set up with typical sort of Midlands kind of rates. As you get further north up to Scotland, these will probably drop down. As you head towards the southeast, these will probably go higher. So one thing you would need to do is spend a few minutes adjusting these, but just to give you a quick show here, that's all the labourers. There's only about 40, okay? And it's very simple to change the rate. You right-click on the labour that you'd like to change. You click on the button that says Set Price. And basically there are two choices. There's either Building Works price or there's your price, which is known as Me. So if your brickwork labourer is on £16 an hour, you type in the price, you tell it to use it, and if you want to apply that on all your estimates, you simply do not tick this box here, which applies it to this project only. Click OK, and there we go. You've now changed your bricklayer's labourer to £16 in all jobs. So if you're working on several jobs, they'll all change simultaneously, so you don't have to go through and change this on each project. If I right-click on my bricklayer here, I'm already using a Me price here. I can actually go back to using my price tracker price. Or I can go back in and set it back to the Me price and actually say he's on £28 an hour, please use him. Okay, materials is very much the same. This time I'm going to have a look at, say, some aggregates. And one thing we do with our materials is that we internet trade scrape the prices. We look at a whole range of online material merchants who give prices which are probably far closer to trade. We still err on the side of caution, so they still might be slightly higher than you would pay if you've negotiated with a local merchant, but they're a really good set of prices to start with. Of course, what I would say is that it's still worth going and doing a bit of editing on these. The way I would do that is once I've done an estimate, I would look at my materials used and I would pick probably the top 10 to 15 materials by value, have a look at the prices of those, review them and change them, because they will probably account for 60 to 70% of all your material prices. There's no point in running around trying to edit the price of some nails which are worth £6. But if you've got £7,000 worth of blocks, you would certainly go and have a look at the block price and make sure that that's correct. And again, to change that, similar principle. So you might be paying £37, £38 for your bulk bag. Right click, set price. Let's say £37, use, click OK, job done. Okay, and that's it, a quick overview of Building Works. So what I'd say now, guys, if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask away. As I said on the little question on the GoToMeeting box, you've got a section where you can ask questions. I'll give you 1 minute or two to type, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions you've got.